You are now listening to Carlie's Couch.
I'm Carlie.
And I'm Lex.
In this podcast, we discuss a wide array of topics about life and how to live your best life,
whatever that looks like for you.
Hope y'all enjoy.
This week on Carlie's Couch, we're talking about fear. Is it holding you back in a good or bad way?
Ooh, how you feeling today, Lexi?
Feeling good, feeling great. Thanks for listening. All is going pretty well. How about you?
Yeah. Like I'm over here dancing, having a little day party in my head. She was playing some Janet Jackson. Got me right on right.
I know. I didn't even really think about how many bops she had, but they're still good as far as like you don't even feel dated listening to it. So I've been listening to a lot of Janet Jackson lately. I don't know. That might be the era I'm getting into right now.
Look, because we just celebrated a birthday, so.
Right.
But today we talking about fear, and how fear can either help us or hold us back. And so fear is important because it's in our DNA. It's supposed to keep us alive, keep us functioning, keep us safe. So that's a good thing. But the bad thing is that in today's world, it can do the opposite. It can think it's keeping us safe and like from death and danger, but really it's just from moving forward and growing.
Yeah, we've gotten mad soft since the cave days.
And so softer each year.
Yeah, ain't no saber-toothed tigers after us, no nothing. It's just they might not like me. But it is what it is. That's the way things have become. And what's so funny is that our bodies really react to fears, even if they're seemingly smaller than the fears of back in the day, in the same way. And so it's important for us to be able to like evaluate when we do feel fear and make sure that if we're going to stay in a space of fear, that it is for our actual protection, and making sure it's not like a smoke screen keeping us from doing the things that may be a blessing or an expansion for us. So the real question we're going to essentially discuss today is, how do we know when fear is a signal to stop versus when fear is a nudge and a step forward?
Yeah. So the first part in that is recognizing, what does fear look like in our bodies, in our minds, and in our lives? And so fear isn't just mental, it's physical, it's emotional, it's all of these things. And so first, what does fear look like physically?
For me, fear looks like my chest getting tight, when you can feel your heart beating, getting sweaty, just like a nervous energy, like when you can feel kind of the adrenaline through your body. That's what I feel when I'm recognizing that I'm in a fearful mode.
Yeah, as I say, the only other thing, I feel on edge a little bit, like when I'm fearful, or some people might get butterflies. Like I've heard like that's something that happens whenever you get fear, maybe a clenched jaw or like twitchy, like moving around a lot.
Yeah, and then on the emotional side too, feelings of anxiety, overwhelm, and being kind of flooded by negative thoughts or doubtful type thoughts, and also like paralysis and avoidance. So for me in those times, sometimes when I'm fearful, how it may manifest itself is that's when I'm like, man, I'm gonna just go watch something, or I'm gonna numb out, or let me go sit on my balcony now instead of writing this email. And it might feel like you're taking a break or doing something else, but it is important to recognize that actually I'm practicing an avoidance mechanism at those times and just trying to tell myself like, oh, I'm in a safe place, I can go chill, when really I should be chilling.
And what's interesting is like, it sounds like a lot of these things aren't directly connected to fear, but that's how it manifests in our lives. So there's some mental ones, you like mentioned the negative thoughts, but overthinking, when you're stuck, when you feel stuck, when you're overthinking, when you're comparing yourself, that procrastination, whenever it's keeping you from doing a thing or moving forward. And then also self-doubt. Anytime and it might not like, oh, I'm doubtful of myself today, but you could not submit a job application because you're scared. And then that is the self-doubt. Like, oh, I might not get it. Oh, what if I don't have enough experience? They might not think I'm good enough. And those are the fears. And that's how it manifests.
Sometimes we'll get like a voice or a feeling like, I don't know about that thing. which we call intuition. Is that a fear, or is there a difference between fear and intuition? Like, how do we know when we're stopping ourselves, or if it's something else?
I think so. We talked about the physical implications of fear. Whenever I feel like I'm guided by my intuition, I don't have those. And so I might, for example, and mine's like a very physical thing, but for my mom always told me to trust my intuition. It'll keep me safe. And so even in like scary situations, like if I'm, driving a certain way home and all of a sudden I'm like, I should probably drive that way instead today. I follow it and it feels very calm. It doesn't feel like forced. It doesn't like I just went on a work trip, like maybe a couple of weeks ago, and I was like looking at all these hotels and I was like, something just don't feel right about this area. And it's not like I'm like, oh my God, I'm so scared. It was just like, my intuition's like, that ain't it. Yeah, let's just keep it pushing. So I ended up staying somewhere else and it was awesome. Didn't have no feelings. But I feel like for me, that's kind of how I can like tell the difference between intuition and fear.
So for you, it felt more like a guide and let me move in this way. So you're still moving, whereas fear a lot of times like keeps you from moving. Oh shoot, while you were talking, an example for me came, with fear, and I guess based off of what you said, maybe mine is a fear, but I was thinking about how like oftentimes when I am about to, and usually it's when I'm going down some steps, when I'm about to like go down some steps, sometimes in my head I'll be seeing like the do, and I don't know why, and I'll be trying not to, and I'm like, oh, don't think like that, because like I'm like, oh shoot, does that mean I'm about to fall down these steps or trip or something? And then I'll be like real like slow, but I don't know. I guess that may be fear because it's not exactly intuition, but every once in a while in like random situations or walking under, if somebody's doing construction on the sidewalk and they have like the little tarp things they set up. You're the construction person, so you might know what I'm talking about. But I'll be like, because I'm like, something's gonna fall off the building on me. Like I hate when I have like a premonition or something that's like something's gonna happen to me, because I'm like, I don't want to be calling that stuff to me, and it does make me move a little more carefully. But that's probably more fearful, because it's chaotic. It's like I don't know. It's more so making me nervous. So that's something that I think about, where it's like that's not exactly intuition, but I'm like foreseeing me tearing something up.
Have you fallen down some stairs like that before?
Not that I can remember. Not like as crazy as I be seeing it in my head.
Yeah, so I would say maybe that's fear, but also I would say that's part of like evolution and experience. Like if we've seen stuff, like when I was in New York with my best friend.
I mean, I actually have a couple times. So.
Yeah, and then so that's sense. Like for example, I was in New York with my best friend and we were walking to the gym, because I go to the gym with her when I'm on the East Coast. I be on this and I make her go too. But I was like walking under this thing. She was like, girl, don't walk under that. That'll drip on, and all these things. And I'm like, oh, that's just experience. That's not necessarily fear. That's like good sense. And so I would say some of that is good sense, but like the fear of falling could also make you fall. So I'm glad you're like, I'm not going to do that, but just move a little.
Or like when
carefully.
I walk out into this street, sometimes I'll be like, oh, a car's going to come zoom down. Like sometimes I'll like have a vision of something crazy happening, and I'm like, I don't want to think like that. But still, it does make me be like, let me look both ways and move the way I should move. Do you have any examples of a recent fear that's shown up for you lately?
Outside of, well, that wasn't really a fear. Maybe just the fear of, like, because I noticed I was procrastinating with getting some like legal paperwork and other paperwork stuff done, and I recognized I was procrastinating, and I was fearful. I noticed it was fear because I was like, oh man, what if I mess this up? What if I do it wrong? And so I was just kind of avoiding doing things that I know I need to be doing.
Mine is more like when asked the question like what's a recent fear, what I'm really thinking about is like, dang, when was I like really stressed? And actually today, but I'm trying to connect, like, is that with a fear per se? But I would say a fear around not knowing how something's gonna work out, because I don't typically, let's just say, like, I could be more stressed or more worried about it or more frantic perhaps. So I don't necessarily get as frantic as I could, but like I could feel like super stressed, like, man, I don't know how this about to work, like, and like just not being in a good situation. So I would say that, like, a fear around like not being sure what the timing, when like the timing and stuff is kind of off, or like what's gonna work with that. And what was the second part of that question? Oh, how does it show up for you? Yeah, I just like super nervous, chest tight, and I will say, and it just jogs my brain into like, all right, what are some things I could do to try to cushion for this, or help things move in the way that I hope it moves. So yeah. I kind of just put extra brain power into stuff.
That sounds like it's moving you forward, though. Like, not the fear itself.
Yeah, but I shouldn't have been in this position. So that's the thing is, when you're dealing with stuff, it's always like, all right, what is this showing me? And it's always reminders, like how we talked about the last episode. It's always reminders of like, all right, I want not be in this position again. A more, as you go thing would have been a little more helpful. And it sucks that you have to get to things like breaking apart for you to figure stuff out, but that's what that's there to show you. And I'm gonna keep dealing with the same thing until I start doing what I need to be doing. Or as much of it is in my control as can be. So I think I do look at those things from a decently healthy standpoint.
It sounds like it. And it sounds like a lot of growth too, because your reaction might not have always been that. Because a lot of people get barely paralyzed by fear. A lot of people can lash out because they're scared, and then they're like, and be all angry. Mm-hmm. It can incite like feelings of unworthy. Like, there's so many things that happen with fear, but thinking about solutions, pondering and reflecting, how did I get here? How can I do better? Instead of like beating yourself up. Like, that sounds like a lot of growth there.
Yeah, I actually don't beat myself up. I just be moving into, I gotta figure something out. But it's still stressful though, and also I recognize, so how people be like, oh, you trust everything's working for the good, right? Mm-hmm. So let's say, well, actually that's kind of extra. So when things are happening, and I'll be like, oh yeah, I trust that it's gonna work out, like, bills gonna pay for whatever. But actually it's like, but they might not. And then like, what happens if like you might get kicked out of your whole place, or your phone cut off or whatever, right? Like, it could go all those levels. And in my life, or in particular situations, there's not a level that I can imagine where it's like, I already know like what support I could have, or, like what things could happen. Like, if my phone got cut off tomorrow, if I got kicked out of my apartment, whatever, I also know like I would be alive. So like, that's kind of a thing. That's a stupid thing to have to think like, that's the silver lining, but also it's like actually recognizing that none of this stuff is the end of the world.
And facing that is so important. And so before we move into assessing our fear, when I was reading about fear, the Stoics, they actually confront all their fears head on, and they role play. And so one of them, for example, like let's say you fear bankruptcy, like you messed up a bad business investment, you lost your whole house, kit and caboodle too, your wife don't know, so they put themselves in the most extreme situations. For example, if that was your fear, being out on the street, maybe they eat meager rations, they sleep on their floor, they don't have any money, they don't have a phone because now they can't pay for it, and they just do that. And at the end, you have lessons like, oh, I'm still alive, like, and not to say like positive or toxic positivity, like, oh, but it's okay, but also like, it is, and you are, and you can come back from things. But they kind of face things head on whenever they're looking at fear.
Yeah, I know somebody else who similarly, a couple of people actually have said that they've done this, where they challenge themselves to speak to more people when they go out, as far as like, speaking to women or whatever when they go out. If they not afraid of like doing stuff in public, like going to a random place and like dancing, getting on the dance floor, doing things, right? Like really pushing as soon as you're like, you feel a little fear about doing a thing or showing up in a particular way, forcing yourself to do it, because the more you do that, you do get comfortable with uncomfortable situations, and then you become somebody who is kind of unbreakable. So it is a good practice with a lot of our fears to approach them head on, but it takes a lot of strength to do that.
It does, but then you're on the other side and have grown through them. So whenever you notice a fear in your life, I would challenge you like to assess it, to ask yourself, is this fear keeping me safe? Like, am I gonna die if I do this thing, or is it keeping me comfortable and keeping me from growing? Is this keeping me from being my ideal self? So I'm like looking at my fears, like, for example, not filling out the paperwork. I'm not going to die. I'm going to be okay. It's going to be uncomfortable. I might not like whatever happens afterwards, but it'll get done. And, okay, so this is something I can move forward.
Yeah, and then with these questions too, it's like once you actually realize you need to move forward and you start to do so, it's so much more helpful. Because I was like that with my student loans, where I like was acting like they didn't exist, and then I finally one day was like, let me actually look at this and figure out, just start doing something for a solution. Because what's the point of sitting here and letting a thing like just beat at me month after month after month after month, like just hitting my credit crazy for no reason. And I'm just over here, like it's no big deal. And it's like, actually, let's look at these things and take care of them, because I'll actually feel better with what happens. So the next question you can ask yourself is, what's the cost of staying where I am? You want a 100 credit score, or you want to be able to have a line of credit?
I didn't even know they go down that low.
Which one is which? And pay a little small bit of your whatever every month. The cost of staying where you are, though, can also be a difficult question for people, because you also have to have a mindset that is not very limited. And I will say one thing about me, and that even my friends know, like I'm not very limited in how I speak or think about things. And I'm not like perfect, but I can tell when I'm around people and they say comments or say things, and I'm like, there's so much more. Like you can want everything, you can have everything, and when I hear people who seem to be so limited, it always makes me kind of sad, because it's like what we don't think there's more to gain outside of like where we are, and that's just not true. So you have to actually have that imagination, at least too, to recognize like, okay, there may be way more outside of like staying comfortable where you are.
That's actually one of my favorite things about you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
My now I got another side story. My friend had put on her Instagram story like a screenshot of a text, and somebody had texted her, stop putting me on to expensive stuff that I can't keep up with. And she was like, LOL. And then I laughed at it, but then she told me like, yeah, somebody asked me if that was you, and I was like, yeah, I don't think that limited, bro. Like I would never be like, don't introduce me to that, or nah, like nah.
Introduce me to all the things.
Nah.
I'm here for experiences.
What are we talking about? Nah, I wouldn't say that. And so like I kind of like that about myself too. And yeah, there's too many things that are possible, and you always have to kind of catch yourself and be like, oh shoot, even when you say I want something big, that still could be limiting. Like you can want everything, or if it's like this versus this, or want this and I'll kind of settle for this, like you actually don't have to do that. So even if you think big, still knowing that you could be thinking limited in some ways.
And that goes into the last question, is like, what's the potential gain if I'm able to push through or grow through this fear? And I love that, like, your 1 and 2 options are never the only options. Should I go to this school or this school? You could not go to school and move to Brazil and do something completely different with your life. There's always unlimited things. But whenever you're looking at your fear, it's like, man, I'm so scared. Most people are so scared of losing a thing that they never look at what they could gain. Like, oh man, I don't want to lose this relationship, even though it's not really serving me. I don't feel so good. This might not be my person. They don't want the same things that I want. They don't really look at the whole breadth of options that the universe can give you whenever you let something go.
Mm-hmm. And even with those everyday kind of fearful moments where it's like, you got to send an invoice, or I got to write this statement of work or whatever, where it's like, I don't know, it's like not scary. And like, those are things sometimes you kind of like avoid getting to. And just, I am able to move through those things a little more quickly now, because it's just like, bro, let's just get to the money, bro. Like, even I was on a call yesterday where we were talking about a new service, and I was like, okay, I'll sit down and write a statement of work for you. But in my head, I knew how much I want to charge. And I was like, actually, you know what? Let me just tell you how much I'm probably going to tell you. It's going to be right now. So I don't even waste my time doing all this stuff. So I was like, I'm thinking this. And it's like, okay. And I'll still draft up the stuff, but it's like, let's just get to it. Because the gain of that is that now today, the next day, I have some money in my account. So it's like, and this also goes back to the stress from before, where I'm like, let me make some shake. And we make stuff shake. So yeah, you just gotta push through and thinking about what could happen with stuff, especially when what it requires is actually not that much. Like you asking somebody a question, or you writing a thing, or doing something, like not even that much. We're really just mostly practicing avoidance.
And I like the idea that it's always an opportunity for more growth, for more opportunities for everything in your life. Like anytime you're looking at fears, and as you're cataloging your fears and you notice them come up in your life, big or small, here are some common root fears. So the fear might be, sending the invoice, but what's the root fear? You're not scared of sending an email. You can do that in your sleep. What you might be scared of is rejection. And then, oh man, they rejected me because then I feel unworthy because I wasn't good enough. They didn't want to be my client because I wasn't good enough. So like always looking at your fears, knowing that there's a deeper root fear connected to it. And so that's one of them is like fear of rejection, fear of judgment. That holds a lot of people back from doing a lot of things, from being themselves, from sharing what they created just because they're so scared of what other people think.
So as you're thinking about your fears or any recent situations, also consider, is it a fear of the unknown and just not knowing what could happen or will happen? Is it a fear of failure or a fear of success, which is really big as well?
Is it a fear of intimacy or vulnerability?
Fear of being seen. That's really big.
That's huge. That holds a lot of people back. And then could be fear of being broke, fear of not being good enough, fear of being unworthy. And fear of being unworthy is actually a really big one for a lot of people. And so looking at that and how that affects you in your relationships, in your money, in how you choose to pursue your life.
And some of those, I think they show up more or they're more recognizable when you look at your actions. Because like you might not be waking up and be like, I'm not worthy. But when you look at your actions and how you move, now it's like, okay, we're giving you some of these like common fears because maybe you can link it back to that and recognize where it's a place that you may want to challenge that fear.
Yeah. And so ways to challenge, the first step is you have to reframe your fear. So fear and excitement are two sides of the same coin. And so you can shift your mindset like, oh my God, I'm so scared.
I did that today too.
Oh, good. So you want to tell the story or no?
Like, man, I don't know how this is going to work. I was like, I'm so excited to see what's about to happen with this. But it feels phony, and it is phony because I'm like, my chest is like, nah, like this shit ain't right. I was like, nah, but it's gonna be straight. Like I'm excited to see what happens because I'm like, all right, I know my life is here, but I'm excited to see what happens. So all right, cool. And I'm trying to think like that, and it feels like you're trying to psych yourself out, and you do kind of like start to move into that space as the things do work out, for themselves.
Yeah. Another one is you can use FOMO as a tool. So the economists describe two different types of FOMO or fear of missing out. The first one is aspirational FOMO. And so that's recognizing that an experience could change your life. And that's something you should probably move forward on versus herd HERD FOMO, like fear of being left out. Like all my friends went to the bar last night and I didn't go, which leads to more reactive decisions as opposed to aspirational ones.
So a question you can ask yourself is, am I afraid of missing out on something truly valuable? Or am I just feeling pressured? Like, think about with FOMO, what the motivation is for the fear of this thing, and then you can kind of assess from there.
Yep. And then the last thing to challenge your fears is to take really small steps to challenge them. And so the first one is take an action that scares you. If you are so terrified of I'll use Lewis Howes as an example. He was so scared to like dance with people and dance in front of people. He started taking a class. So he took a class and then that made him feel more confident. And then he started asking different people to dance with him, which was also a fear of his rejection. And it just became part of who he is. And now he talks about dancing all the time because he loves it.
I think the next one is super big because we don't talk about it that much. We have a tendency to think about what like the worst that can happen very easily. Like it's like, oh man, I'm not gonna be able to do this. This is about to happen. And challenge yourself to actually also visualize what's the best thing that could happen in a particular space, because that's also a valid future or destination for you. And also it kind of lessens the fear of this bad thing, because really what it is, oh man, I don't know what's going to happen. And you can have certainty that it's all working together for your good, as opposed to being like, I'm scared that's going to happen, because you're just not even taking into consideration these other options. And so I think that's a good thing to practice. Imagine like what's the best thing you can think of that could also happen from this as you move through whatever this fear is.
Yeah, because the default is what's the worst. And okay, cool. reference point and what's the best. So you could be like the Stoics if you need that to go role play and do all that stuff, or you can also, or do both if you want to. And another thing is to find proof. So looking at, who has done above and beyond and succeeded in an area that you want to, God bless you, or in something that you're working towards. The last thought I'll say is, if this feels real fake and phony, like, oh, I'm looking at what's the best thing that can happen, but really I feel really bad. Try to see how you can flip your mindset in the sense of like, I'm doing this so this doesn't happen, into what your real desire is. So for example, I'm doing this workout so I won't be fat if that is something that bothers you and that you're really working on, or so I won't be unhealthy, versus like, I'm doing this because it makes me feel good, and trying to figure out like what can be a positive motivation and encouragement.
In that example, which one are you saying?
I'm saying, instead of like, so the mode is exercise, and let's say the fear is you don't want to be overweight, but that's really connected to like you not feeling worthy and stuff. So instead of working out,
the fear, express what the benefit is.
Because the opposite of fear is love. And so if we can just even try to change our mindset as to why we're doing a thing, because it's harder to work out when you're running from something, when you're doing because you hate it and because it's tied to all these negative things, versus I'm doing this because it makes me feel really good. I feel more confident whenever I'm taking care of myself and I'm doing this. So that could be one more trick, is like, what is the love? What is the positive intention or impact you want to have by doing a thing that scares you?
Yeah, I think that's very important. The positive thing and the great thing is that we get to decide if we're going to let our fears be a prison or a pathway forward. So this week, identify one fear that may be holding you back, and think about if it's protecting you or if it's kind of just keeping you comfortable or in a space that could use some expansion. And then think about what's a small step or a small thing that you can do to challenge that fear this week. Let us know how that goes. Hit us up at Carlie's Couch across everything. Share this episode with your scared friends. And we'll see you next week. Bye.